Had another opportunity to get a close-up look at our youth this week. My grandniece went to prom, so we decided to let them have the launch. It has become such a huge thing now. It's some of the things I've heard, I just find them hard to believe, but the prom has almost become like like the Academy Awards or something. I'm not sure what it is. But the couple looked great, they had fun, and everything went very well. I feel good about that. But it has been interesting. And it seems that the longer time drags out and the more moral and selfish mankind becomes, the less interested we are in the Bible. We want to go to church, if you will, but we don't necessarily want to go along with the church. We hear demands that they want a book that more readily reflects our feelings, or as I see it, our insolence, and they want that book to bend to our weaknesses. Yet, if you read the book regularly, you find that there was an indication early on that this book was not ours, but was written for us. A slight but incredibly important difference. The book was written by men, which some people seem to have a problem with. I talked about that a bit last week. But these men were handpicked for this mission by its author. His long-term intention for the earth was told to us from within the book. Let's go to Hebrews, the 1st chapter, the 10th verse. Hebrews, the 1st chapter, the 10th verse, where it says, "And you, Elohim, at the beginning founded the earth, and the heavens are works of your hands." Notice this: they will vanish away, but you will continue. And they will all become old like a garment. Verse 12, "And you shall fold them up like a covering, and they shall be changed. But you are the same, and your years shall not fail." In other words, you're not going to die. You're not going anywhere. This passage was initially found in the Torah, the Old Testament. And if you go there, you can see that there's no difference. Psalms, the 102nd chapter, the 25th verse. Psalms, the 102nd chapter, the 25th verse, where it says, "Before time you founded the earth, and the heavens are the works of your hands. They shall perish." Note that. "They shall perish, but you shall endure. Yea, all of them shall wear out like a garment. You shall change them like clothing." This is an indication that it's fascinating that no one has seen. If something wears out and it will change, it basically is telling you that where that physical universe is now, is it possible that at some point in the change out, it becomes not a physical universe, but a spiritual universe? I'm sure I'm not the first one that's seen this, but this is interesting stuff here. "You shall change them like clothing, and they shall be changed. But you are he, and your years shall not be ended. The sons of your servants shall dwell, and their seed shall be established before you. And to the point, Yahweh made this speaking of himself in Malachi, the 3rd chapter, the 6th verse, one I'm sure we've all heard before. Malachi, the 3rd chapter, the 6th verse, where it says, "For I, Yahweh, change not. Therefore you sons of Jacob are not consumed or destroyed." Point being, the earth will eventually cease to exist. But all who conform to his will and follow his plan will exist with Elohim in whatever form and in whatever habitation that he will form after the earth. The earth is physical and will last so long as physical beings will be there to inhabit. But the interesting thing is, seems to be saying here that after there are no more physical beings, there will be no need for a physical universe. Implication being, didn't come right out and say it, but the implication is that there will at that point a new garment be laid out, and that garment will be spiritual. I can't even wrap my mind around that. I can't even guess on that. I can't even imagine what that would look, feel, or be like. So I'm not gonna go there. But the slowness of God, as we count slowness, moving toward this reality apparently is just too slow for most of our young restless ones to take. I read a fascinatingly shallow, they thought it was thoughtful, I'm sure, but when you read in between the lines, that's usually where the problems come in, and that's usually the first thing I do. I say, wait a minute, that's what you said, but that's not what you meant here. There was an article I read this week claiming to know why young people have abandoned the church, if you will. Hear this from the new young generation. It says, Christianity and young people's culture have always clashed. That's true, but for not the reasons they describe, but we'll go forward. More than ever, the digitized global community we live in demands that the church constantly elevate how it will be relevant to this and emerging generations. How much has the human body changed since Adam? Bottom line, same physiology, same psychology. If this be true, why is all of this constant change necessary or even requested? As a matter of fact, it has blossomed beyond request to a demand. They say Christianity and young people's cultures have always clashed more than ever. The digitized global community we live in demands, didn't say request. They stand before God. Whose church is this? They're telling God, I demand that the church constantly elevate how it will be relevant to this and emerging generations. As the church seeks to preserve tradition, it constantly must be faced with resistance from rebellious young people. And generally, what has God already set in place? Age does not stop. So eventually, those young people will turn into older people. And maybe they will begin to realize that the reason these things don't change is because despite our refusal to go along with them, they do work. They do work. And he says here, the church continues to alienate young people with old, stagnant ideas that young people don't view as innovative enough to keep up with their lives in this digital age. What has happened that's so great about this digital age? You can type, you can write. Heck, we used to write on paper. You're typing on a computer, it's the same words. Oh, you might use some different words now that most of us don't understand anyway and don't really mean a lot. Bay. Oh, shut up, Ray. But you understand what I'm saying. You're trying to be a certain way and trying to remain relevant, but your relevance itself is irrelevant to God because He doesn't care. He cares about you, but whether or not you use a horse, Escalade, or some flying skateboard, He doesn't care. All He cares is that you get from point A to point B. These are things we're interested in, so don't demand that the church issue these things. It doesn't make sense. It's illogical. But we constantly complain. It says black millennials are experiencing economic and social benefits that previous generations only dreamed about. We also dreamed about self-respect too, but has that changed despite Black Lives Matter? No, because let's be honest, all lives do matter. But in the case of those who feel that one or the other, I don't have a problem with the name, I don't have a problem with the concept. But when you lower yourself to the same level of those who you're claiming to be against in order to demand that they give you respect, you lose me. I respect and understand for some obvious and very personal reasons that black lives do matter. But yelling in the streets isn't going to get you anywhere. If you don't believe it, look what's been going on for the last few years. When I say a few years, I'm talking about maybe the last 1,000 or so. This goes back into the dark ages, and you have no idea how dark it was. You have no idea. That they say that because of all of these things that they've amassed, as a result, they don't have a great need for faith in their lives. Because the faith as it is taught has pulled us back into the past, it says. We feel judged. And we feel that our new generational habits, we refuse to check at the door. And we don't really want this kind of religious life. Sounds to me, for those who like to do that, sounds to me like we need a little bit bigger wine rack. That's what it sounds like to me. Sounds like we need a little bit bigger wine rack, and that's W-H-I-N-E. Rack. Because there seemed to be nothing here but a bunch of old wines. I remember making some of the same ones when we were here. We want to do different music. We want to do this, and finally we come to the realization that, hey, we can make some changes, but you don't have to tear the whole thing down and start over again. And most of what we do isn't so bad, I don't think. But I think they want hip hop. Sorry, can't do. Old wines in old wineskin, in new wineskin. That's a new thing. Interesting. And Elohim has heard them all before. And that's who they should direct this toward, not us. Because you see, God's church is here to serve you, but according to the direction of Elohim, not according to the capricious whimsy of man, whatever age. The most amazing stories found in the Bible deal with how we should deal with the world at large when we rub up against it. Or should I say when it bumps up against us, which is usually how it happens. Many of these stories are unbelievable to these young and intellectually bent folk who don't believe them. Yet they believe worldly things that are more bent than they are, and refuse to question them out of fear that they will offend someone. We're told to come to church not because it is a perfect place. It is not. It's a hospital for people who are spiritually unwell, trying to get better. Some take longer than others. To think that we all are going to hit the same level at the same time and reach nirvana, no, doesn't work like that. It's not that way. But it is based, however, on the teachings of a book that, when taught properly, it is perfect. It's perfectly laid out. And if followed perfectly, or as close as we can get, our lives will become all the better. Problem is, most don't understand it. Even as I read through these articles, I came to realize that most of the incongruities of the problems that came because, like most people in this age, they didn't have time to richly read it and figure out, wow, that's not really what that says. Oh, that's really not what that means. Oh, wow. Some people must not even be reading this because this says that and they're doing that in the church. Oh, wow, this must not even, and they didn't even get that far. They didn't dig that deep to even figure out that a lot of what Christianity is doing isn't even in here. So they're attacking nominal or normal Christianity and saying, do this for us or else. When in point of fact, they come here, they'll hear something completely different. And maybe figure some things out that don't have to be changed, but just have to be understood properly. Read this book properly and exercise what's in it to the best of your ability. Your life will become better. Problem is, as I said, most don't understand it, and many who do have some understanding have chosen to follow the world rather than to follow the book. The world, as we have already seen, will not be here always. But our obedience to this book's way holds a rather unfathomable promise for all who remain true to it according to the law and the word of Elohim. Let's go to 1 John, the 2nd chapter, the 15th verse. 1 John, the 2nd chapter, the 15th verse, where it says, do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Because all that which is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And he throws it back in there just to remind you. And the world is passing away, and its lust. But the one doing the will of Elohim abides forever. That's cleverly placed in very specific places throughout the Bible. But it is a lifetime endeavor to do two things. Number one, to find that will of God, and two, to adhere to it. This is the problem as I see it. We humans are creatures of our environment, and our environment is very much, unfortunately, socially toxic. But regardless, we tend to make an effort to blend in and do what the majority do, right or wrong. But in this blind following of social mores and habits, we eventually find ourselves bending to the will of society, even when society goes against the word of Elohim. Look at what has happened with television. There were words that you simply could not say on television, but now because you can call somebody a B on TV, you hear it all the time in the streets. Because somebody said they're off on TV, you hear people walking around, even in the church, I'm off. You bent to society, whether you admit it or not. We must first accept that we have found ourselves in this state of being bent toward society. And we have to make a determination within ourselves to stand up for the will of God. Title of this one, To Bend or to Stand Up. To bend or stand up. The whining about the church is hardly important. Young people will always do that. There's a need in the young to believe that they have new answers, when in point of fact, if they go back 20 years, they find that the kids that came through college behind them came up with the same answers. Let's smoke weed, let's get drunk, let's skip classes, and let's go and cram all night to try to make it through. Every ensuing generation has found that the same things don't work. For everyone that makes it through, there are a few that fail for the same reasons. And they later on find out that there is a whole other reality behind the scenes that they know not of. And they didn't learn about it in school, because the school told you it wasn't there. And like Satan, the world told them that it doesn't exist, just like it tells them that Satan doesn't exist. Yet, these realities do exist, as do Satan, just as they did in Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, steeped in paganism, steeped in false gods, and steeped in backbiting and evil. Let's go to Daniel, the 3rd chapter, the 1st verse. We're going to be here for a while, because there's a story here that shows you what's important. Daniel, the 3rd chapter, the 1st verse, where it says, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and its breadth 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the justices, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then were gathered the assembled government officials, the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the justices, and all the officials of the provinces to the dedication of this image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald cried aloud, a crier, a person of warning, let you know what's going on. To you it is commanded, O people, nations and languages, at the time you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the bagpipe, and all sorts of music, in other words, when the orchestra strikes up, you shall fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship at the moment, they will be thrown into the middle of a burning fiery furnace. Therefore, at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, the pipe, the zither, the lyre, the harp, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then at that time, certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews, or the Judeans. They spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, come right in, sucking up, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who shall hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the zither, the lyre, the harp, and the bagpipe, that's too much detail. This isn't something good coming here. We already know all this. Why are you repeating it all? When you hear somebody got too much detail, watch them. If you've already heard. The lyre, the zither, the bagpipe, and all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship, he should be thrown into the midst of a fiery, burning furnace. Here it comes, verse 12. There are men, Judeans, whom you set over the business of the province of Babylon. 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, do not heed you. Knew it was coming, didn't you? They do not serve your gods, nor worship the golden image which you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in anger and wrath, which they knew was coming, commanded them to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spoke to them and said to them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do you not serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now, if you are ready at the time you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the zither, the lyre, the harp, and bagpipe, and all kinds of music. They had bagpipes. They had bagpipes. I don't like bagpipes, but we won't go there. When you hear all kinds of music, fall down and worship the image which I have made. But if you do not worship, in that moment you will be thrown into the middle of a burning, fiery furnace. And who is that God who shall deliver you out of my hand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to return a word to you on this matter. If it is so that Elah, now that I hadn't heard. That's for those who are studying H426, an Aramaic masculine noun meaning a deity or divinity, whom we serve. Just think of it as Yahweh and you would be on the right track. He is the one to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. Then he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. Whoa. Somebody stood up. Somebody stood up. Verse 18. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor worship the golden image which you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with wrath, and the form of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. We're going to burn these guys up. We're going to make an example out of them. Or so they thought. Verse 20. And he commanded mighty men in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to throw them into the fiery furnace. Then these men were tied up in their slippers, their tunics, their mantles, and their other clothes. Put all their clothes on them, make it even warmer for them. It's not like they're coming back. Verse 22. Then, because the king's commandment was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The fire was so hot that when they reached over to throw them in, it burned them. Burned them up, killed them. Verse 23, and these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the midst of the burning, fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was amazed, and he rose up in haste and spoke and said to his advisors, did we not throw three men bound into the middle of the fire? They answered and said to the king, true, O king. He answered and said, behold, I see 4 men loose, walking in the middle of the fire. Might have been dancing. And there is no harm among them. And the form of the fourth, is like a son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near the door of the burning fiery furnace. He wouldn't step all the way up to it for obvious reasons. He answered, and they answered, and then he came near the door of the fiery furnace and answered and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come forth and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth from the middle of the fire. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's advisors gathered and saw these men on whose bodies the fire had had no power. And their hair of their heads was not scorched, nor were their slippers changed, nor had the smell of fire clung on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke and said, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and has delivered his servants who trusted in him, and have changed the king's words and have given their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own, Elah. And a decree is given by me that every people, every nation, and every language who speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be made into mere members, and his house shall be made an outhouse. Because there is no other God who can deliver in this way. Verse 30. But notice he didn't worship in himself yet. Then the king made Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego prosper in the province of Babylon. Whatever is to come, it doesn't matter what music we're listening to. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. It doesn't matter whether it's 100 years old or whether it was written last week. We're not here because of how we are here. We're here because we were told to come here to worship God. However we are here, the more important thing is what we learn in our hearts, because the time will come when we will have to either bend to man or stand up for Elohim and honor the law of Elohim rather than these edicts of man. Elohim will save us from any evil that we're confronted with that challenges his word, so long as we are keeping that word. Notice what happened to Peter in the days 1 year after the martyrdom of Yeshua. Let's go to Acts, the 12th chapter, the first verse. Acts, the 12th chapter, the first verse. Now at that time, Herod, the king, stretched forth his hand to mistreat certain of the ecclesia, or the church. And he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, interesting. Here we are, we're doing the work of Yeshua, yet you've got a small group here, still under Herod, that are still working against this new work of Yeshua, who want them hurt, want them killed, want bad things to happen to them. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, or Judeans, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread. And when he had apprehended him, wait a minute, the days of what? This is in Acts 12. Now, I wonder how long these young people, old people, any people have seen this here and ignored it. You get my point. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after the Passover to bring him forth to the people. You know what they were going to do. You want this one or you want that one. If we're here, we're going to kill him. That was the plan. Same thing that happened with Yeshua, between Barabbas and Yeshua. Same thing was going to happen. Verse 5. Peter, therefore, was kept in the prison, and the congregation made prayer outside unto God for him. And when Herod would have brought him forth the same night, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains. And the guards before the door that kept the prison, we're not going to let this one get away either. Chain him up, and you 2 sit in front of him and have a guard outside the gate. Make sure this one doesn't claim he flew into heaven or something. Verse 7. And behold, the angel of Elohim came upon him, and a light shone in the prison, and he smote Peter on the side and woke him up, saying, Arise quickly. And his chains fell off his hands. That which is not physical can manipulate that which is physical with no problem. Touched it, melted for a second, fell off. Verse 8. And the angel said unto him, Gird yourself and bind on your sandals. And so he did. And he said unto him, Cast your garment about you. In other words, put your coat on. It's a little cold out there. Cast your garment about you and follow me. And he went out and followed him, and knew not that it was true which was done by the angel, but thought he saw a vision. He's thinking he's dreaming. Wow, this can't happen. I got to be dreaming this. Thought he saw a vision. When they were past the first and the second guard, they came unto the iron gate that leads out into the city, which opened to them of its own accord, just swung open. A locked gate, just swung open. And they went out and passed on through one street, and then the angel departed from it. And when Peter was come to himself, in other words, he finally figured out what was going on, he says, Now I know of a surety that Elohim has sent his angel and has delivered me out of the hand of Herod and from all the people of the Jews who waited for me. And considering this, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together praying. And as Peter knocked at the door of the patio, a damsel came to the door named Rhoda. And when she recognized Peter's voice, she opened not the gate for gladness. She was so glad to see him, she forgot to open the door and let him in. But ran in and told how Peter stood at the gate. And they said to her, You are mad. They knew what happened once they took you into the Roman prison. There was no getting out. If he was taken to prison, there's no way he's at the door. He said, You are mad. You're crazy. But she affirmed constantly that it was so. Then they said, It is his angel. But Peter continued knocking. And when they had opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. But he, beckoning unto them with hand to be silent. In other words, shh, it's middle of the night, not so much noise. They haven't figured it out yet. Cool out. Declared unto them how Elohim had brought him out of the prison. And he said, Go, make these things known unto James and to the brethren. And he departed and went to another place. Now, as soon as it was day, there was no small stir, oh, I'm sure, among the soldiers concerning what had become of Peter. As we saw in the Bible study, what he thought was going to happen, it happened here. And when Herod had sought for him and found him not, he examined the guards. What happened here? And commanded that they should be executed. You let a guy go, we're taking your head. Then he went down from Judea to Caesarea and abode there. These stories are here to lift our spirits and show the power of God to save us from any situation if we remain true to his word and law. And when we fail and repent, he will restore us through his grace. This is the reality of faith in Yeshua. The modern world doubts the reality of Elohim, thus rarely sees true miracles. Oh, we see the ones on TV, but we know what they're worth. Yet, they even disparage the simple act of worship unless it includes allowing them to repackage the entire worship service and even the Word of God to reflect their expectations, which unfortunately are minimal. They usually want the same stuff: money, fame, and someone to hear their complaints. These attitudes are reflective of the lack of true understanding of faith in total. Faith doesn't expect God to give us what the world demands that we have. It is a constant irritant that so many media heads talk. You ever get on the radio and people, the church should do this. The church should bring them all in and give them this and hand them this, and the church should do this, and the church ought to do this. I won't name anybody. There was a certain African-American station on iHeartRadio where one of the, they call him the governor, they're constantly whining about what the black church won't do. First of all, there is no black church. It is God's church, which encompasses all churches. Why don't you ask them what to do? This church, they say, should do more to make the community better. We're teaching something that if the people in the community would do it, they might be better. Yet no one is telling the criminals and the miscreants in the community what they should stop doing to make the community less violent and dangerous to children and especially the elderly. But nobody's going to go to them and say, you ought to do this, because you know what's going to happen? Out comes the gats, and here comes a rain of lead. And with no God, not believing in God, they're thinking, that's it, I'm done. So they won't ask them. They come to the church because they figure the church isn't going to do anything, and they might get scared enough and try to listen to them. No. Not being associated with any churches, how can you know what's going on in the church? Go in, listen, hear things. You might learn that the church isn't there to serve the world, it's there to show it the way. If we let you come in and change what we do, what can we show you? You're teaching us. And you know what happens when the third graders take over the classroom, right? Most of this attitude is rooted in the things in the world, so you kind of have to ignore it as much as you can. But you see, the church of God is here to prepare us for the world to come and to worship God as he has instructed and show this world what it means. Few out there have even heard the truths of the Bible intact. And when they do, they want to say, I don't believe that. Others have heard, but don't yet believe them to be true, because they're not working on faith, they want proof. Yet the Bible will come and bring its truth as prophecy in the end time. We heard about that last week. However, many are so locked into what they see in this world that they may still not hear the truth when it comes to them, or consider the world's orders to be more important than the one order that Elohim has given to us all. You see, in the end, just as Nebuchadnezzar did, the beast power ruling the entire earth through a one world government to come will again force worship of an idol beast. When the beast or Satan appears on earth, he will consolidate the diversity of Babylon's religions into a one world church state. Many may like this ecumenical mix initially, with all of the violence and destruction all going on around them and the death occurring in the world. Many may feel that this mix of religions and ecumenism is a good thing, that it will bring people together, not realizing that the faith offered there is not of Elohim. Is not of Elohim, but is a worship of Satan. At that time, wicked people rebelling against both God and the devil will have no choice but to worship the devil, or, as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, well, maybe they'll have it as good as they have. God is still in charge. But in many cases, because they bent rather than stood up, most likely they're going to die. Revelation, the 13th chapter, the first verse. Revelation, the 13th chapter, the first verse, where it says, "And I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast come up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 diadems or crowns, and on its head names of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and its feet as of a bear, and its mouth as a lion's mouth." Notice, didn't say anything about an eagle, but we'll get to that later. "And the dragon gave its power to it, and its throne and great authority. And I saw one of its heads as having been slain to death, and its deadly wound was healed. And all the earth wondered at the beast." He came back to life. That's not what really happened, but that's a longer story than we'll deal with today. Verse 4. "And they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, 'Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with it and win?' And a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies was given to it." In other words, this beast can speak. This statue can speak. "And a mouth giving great things and blasphemies was given to it, and authority to act 42 months was given to it. And it opened its mouth in blasphemy toward Elohim, to blaspheme his name, blaspheme his tabernacle, and to blaspheme those tabernacling in heaven. We miss this every time. We miss this every time. Gets back to what we were talking about last week. When you get down to that last 7 plagues, we're not even here. We're getting our crowns, getting our new names, getting our orders, and all of that on a sea of glass. Verse 7. And it was given to it to war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given to it over every tribe and tongue and nation. And all those dwelling in the earth will worship it. Those of whom the names had not been written in the book of life, of the Lamb, having been slain from the foundation of the world. Let's go down to verse 11. And I saw another beast come up out of the earth, and it had 2 horns like a lamb, but spoke like a dragon. Oh, it looked peaceful and looked nice, but cursed and blasphemed worse than the first beast. Verse 12. And it executes all the authority of the first beast before it, and it causes that the earth and those dwelling in it should worship the first beast, of which was healed its deadly wound. And it does great signs, that it even causes fire to come down out of heaven onto the earth before men. Now, if you see somebody go snap their fingers and fire comes down, what would you think? Well, now you know not to be impressed by that. Satan can do that. Only thing he can't do, he can fake it, which is what he did with this beast. He can pretend to come back. And what he basically did was came down into this person and took his body as he did Judas. And he got him just before he died and brought him back in full strength. But to the outside world, it looked like he died and came back to life. But what really happened there was this. Satan came down and indwelt that body, and that became your beast power. But an interesting thing happens when that happens. Once you become human, God can make you stay that way. Verse 14. And it deceives those dwelling on the earth because of the signs which were given to it to do before the beast, saying to those dwelling on the earth to make an image to the beast, who has the wound of the sword and lived, or so it looked. And it was given to it to give a spirit to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and might cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And the small and the great, the rich and poor, for the first time in the history of mankind, the poor will have, and the rich will have an equal chance to be brave, to stand up, or bend over and die. They're still going to die even if they worship it. It's just a matter of how long before they do. Verse 16, and the small and the great and the rich and the poor and the freemen and the slaves, it causes that they give to them all a mark on their right hand and on their foreheads. Even that any could buy or sell except the one having the mark. In other words, if you don't have this mark, you can't buy, you can't sell, which means you basically don't eat. Having the mark or the name of the beast or the number of its name, which is 666. Many who are not serious about their faith in this age may fall into this trap, believing that fealty to the beast will save them because of the ecumenical nature of the beginning of the beast's one world religion. But any who worship the beast or the image will lose their eternity. Now is the time to learn these things and understand them fully. This ego-driven need to make your church reflect the worldly facade of your life is not worth losing it. It all is going to come apart. But you have to have something that will keep you together. It'll be the Word of God. You see, the Bible has to teach things in its own way. And we sit up and say, the Bible agrees with slavery. I can't deal with the church like that. What book told you that? Who told you that? Maybe you should have gone and checked it for yourself. Then you would have found this. You would have found that there's a death penalty for slavering. For slavering, I think is the word. Basically, selling someone into slavery. Deuteronomy, the 24th chapter, the 7th verse. Fascinating. I just like numbers. Why would it be there 24/7? Deuteronomy 24/7. And what does it say? If a man is found stealing a person of his brothers of the sons of Israel and has dealt with him as a slave and sold him, then that thief shall die. And you shall put away the evil from among you. Oh, that's Old Testament. Okay. So let's go to 1 Timothy, the 1st chapter, the 9th verse. Doesn't matter where it says it, the book is one. If he says that you're not supposed to do it, you don't do it. If it says you're going to do it for death, you're going to die. Wondering why there was no eagle there? The United States has never repented of its slavery. 1 Timothy, 1st chapter, the 9th verse. Knowing this, that the law is not laid down for a righteous one, but for lawless and undisciplined ones, for ungodly and sinful ones, for unholy and profane ones. And then he gets a little bit more specific. For slayers of fathers, slayers of mothers, for murderers, for fornicators. Double down on that and got specific. For homosexuals, for slave traders. There it is. It's a punishable offense. For liars, for perjurers, and of any other thing that opposes sound doctrine. You heard somebody I was talking to this week said something about, the Bible says that it's a sin to snitch. What book are they reading? What book are they reading? Leviticus, 5th chapter, 1st verse. Leviticus, the 5th chapter, the 1st verse. And when a person commits sin because they were called to testify under oath, and he was a witness that has seen or known of it, if he does not declare it, then he shall bear his iniquity. In other words, if you don't tell what you know, then you have sinned. Then you have a problem. Not only with the government, but with Elohim. Much of modern life, as borne out in the media, may well be sin against Elohim, but most of modern doctrine is also somewhat unbiblical and based on errant denominational teaching. When the truth of Elohim is revealed prophetically in the end-time tribulation, all will either accept it as truth and live it, even if it temporarily costs us our lives. We must all learn as much about the truth of Elohim as is possible. There is great courage to be found in knowing the fullness of God's truth. This same truth will remove doubt and excise fear. If we happen to wind up in a situation such as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or as Peter, we will already have the courage to endure it because we know what's coming at the end. Because we know that Yeshua will see us through it. And even if we do have to physically die, the next thing we'll see is us floating up to get our rewards on that sea of glass, and then come back to take out the rest of those who never believed it and were never going to. Let us not become too bent to the mores of this world, and we have to learn to stand up for this word of Elohim. God bless you all.